we talked about the rise of monarchy in Israel, and we considered the kings there, like the first king, which is Saul. But last week we focused on the kingship of David and Solomon, their achievements, failures, and contributions. So today we'll be talking about the divided kingdom and the exiles, starting with the division of the kingdom. Let's have a quick background of the division of the kingdom. So please kindly pay attention on what I'm going to narrate at this point. I'm going to narrate the story of how the kingdom was divided and what led to the exile. So starting with the division of the kingdom, after King Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended the throne, and the northern tribes who had grown sad of Solomon's heavy taxation and forced labor sent Jeroboam, a prominent leader, to negotiate with Rehoboam. But before that, you remember that Solomon had to impose a heavy taxation and forced labor on the people in order to carry out his project of building the temple and also the city walls. So, in fulfillment of that prophecy, it led to the division of the kingdom. The prophecy was given by Prophet Ahijah by God. So the northern tribes gathered at Shechem, where they asked Rehoboam to lighten their burden. So Rehoboam in turn seek counsel with the elders who advised his father during King Solomon's reign. So they urged him to be kind and responsive to the people's needs. But however, Rehoboam rejected their advice and instead sought the counsel of his younger friends. They suggested that he responded harshly, like the Rehoboam was to add to the punishment of the people since they were not satisfied with Solomon's own reign. So Rehoboam's response was brutal. And according to Rehoboam, he said, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. So in response to Rehoboam's descent to the people of the northern tribe, he added to their burden instead of reducing it. He also said that my father scourged you with whips, and I will scourge you with scorpions. So the northern tribes felt betrayed and oppressed, and they decided to rebel against Rehoboam's rule. So the 10 northern tribes were led by Jeroboam, and they seceded from the kingdom and formed their own kingdom of Israel, and they made Samaria their own capital. While the southern tribes, consisting of the two major tribes, that's that the kingdom broke into 12, 10 tribes given to Jeroboam and two tribes given to Rehoboam. So the 10 tribes are the northern kingdom, and the two remaining tribes, which is Judah and Benjamin, formed the southern kingdom because they remained loyal to Rehoboam and they formed the kingdom of Judah. And the kingdom of Judah has its capital as Jerusalem. The northern kingdom has its capital as Samaria, while the southern kingdom has its capital as Jerusalem. Now, the division of the kingdom marked a significant turning point in Israel's history, leading to a period of conflict, idolatry, and eventual decline. Now, Jeroboam, fearing the northern tribes would return to Jerusalem because Jerusalem was their main location where they normally go to worship God. So, Jeroboam, as a result of that, decided to introduce a golden calf where the people of the northern tribe would go to and worship. He introduced two golden calves. One was placed at Bethel and the other one was placed at Dan in order for the people not to go to Jerusalem to worship. So Rehoboam, realizing the gravity of the situation, prepared for war against the northern tribes. However, a prophet named Shemaiah intervened, warning Rehoboam not to fight against his brethren. Now, Rehoboam heard the warning, he heeded to the warning, and the conflict was abated. They did not eventually go to war against the northern tribe. Now, the divided kingdom had a distinct history, with the kingdom of Israel experiencing periods of prosperity and also periods of harshness or decline, while the kingdom of Judah also had a dominant force which preserves the Davidic dynasty and the true worship of God. Now, looking at this story, the division of the kingdom serves as a caution about the dangers of pride, oppression, and idolatry, which highlights the importance of wise leadership and faithfulness to God's covenants. Because it was because of Solomon's and Rehoboam's pride that led to the division of the kingdom. Basically, the two of them, they are fully led to the division of the kingdom. So the moral lesson, like I mentioned earlier, is to avert or to be cautious about the dangers of pride, oppression, and idolatry, and also to know the importance of remaining faithful to God's covenants. Now, let's move on to the key word there for Rehoboam's reign. If you're looking at your screen, you see the first one there. Rehoboam was son of Solomon, and he was the successor to Solomon's throne. The kingdom's leaders, which is the leaders of Judah, continued to disobey God's law. And as a result, it led to the spiritual and moral decline of this kingdom. And it eventually led to the people turning to idolatry, immorality, and social injustice, ignoring the prophetic calls for repentance. The Babylonian conquest, this this challenge faced by the people of Judah led to the Babylonian conquest of 586 BCE, where the Babylonian Empire, under the powerful reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered Jerusalem, the capital of Judah. Now, the city was besieged for months, and the inhabitants suffered greatly from famine and diseases. Now, after a long and brutal siege, the walls of Jerusalem were breached, and the Babylonians poured into the city, destroying everything in their path. Now, the temple, the royal palace, and much of the city were destroyed, and many of its inhabitants were killed or taken captives. Now, the Babylonian Empire showed mercy to some, um, people, like that is the poorest of the land, but they showed no mercy to others. They slaughtered the city's defenders and also left the survivor of that city to face an uncertain future. Now, many Judeans, including the king, nobles, and skilled craftsmen, were taken captive and they were deported to Babylon. Now, this exile lasted for about 70 years approximately, during which the Judeans were forced to adapt to a new culture and way of life. They were settled in various parts of the Babylonian Empire, often in areas with harsh living conditions. Now, the exiled Judeans faced significant challenges. Let's look at the challenges that they faced under the Babylonian Empire or the Babylonian exile of 586 BC. Take note, the Babylonian exile, they can ask you as a question, the Babylonian exile happened in what century? The century can be 722 BC, 586, 721, 537. The correct answer there has to be the 586 BC because it's stated there in our text. So now the exiled Judeans faced significant challenges, including one, cultural assimilation, because they had to navigate a new culture and language while maintaining their Jewish identity. Now, it was a difficult task because the Babylonians had their own distinct customs, traditions, and languages. The second aspect of it was that they had spiritual struggles because many Judeans had to question God's presence and purpose in their lives, wondering why they had been punished so severely, and they struggled to understand why God had allowed them to be conquered and exiled. The third aspect of it was the hope and resilience because despite the difficulties that the Judeans faced, they held on to their faith and traditions with prophets like Ezekiel and Daniel, who provided guidance and encouragement to these people. And they continued to observe their laws and customs, even in exile. And they looked forward to the day when they would be restored to their own homeland. Now, the exiled Judeans had to adjust to a new way of life in Babylon because they were forced to live in a foreign land surrounded by different culture and languages. Now, many Judeans were forced to work in menial jobs, while others were able to maintain their positions and influence despite the exile. Now, despite these challenges, the Judeans, or let's say the people of Judah, continued to practice their faith in secret because they gathered in homes and other private spaces to pray, study the law, and observe the Sabbath. The prophet Ezekiel and Daniel played an important role in maintaining the spiritual health of the exiled community, providing guidance and encouragement during this difficult time. So now we've considered the Babylonian exile. Let's look at the causes of this exile. As you can see on your screen, one of the causes of this exile was the continuous disobedience to God's command by the people of Israel. The second aspect was their idolatry and worship of foreign gods. Third aspect is the social injustice and corruption among leaders. And the third one is the ignoring of the prophet's warning. Now, under the aspect of disobedience, the people and their leader disobeyed God's law and commandments. That's under the aspect of disobedience. And under the aspect of idolatry, they were persistent in worshiping idols. That was what led to their exile or their punishments. Now, what was the effect of this exile? The effect of the exile between these two kingdoms or among these two kingdoms was the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, because the Jerusalem was the capital of the southern tribe. So the major effect there was the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And the second aspect is the lot of national identity, because the people were led to exile. They had to lose their national identity and autonomy. The third aspect was the scattering of the Israelites. The fourth one is the spiritual renewal and shifts to synagogue worship, because the exile led to a spiritual transformation with a renewed focus on God's law and traditions. That means they had to change the way they worship God. The fifth aspect of it has to do with the rise of prophetic literature and Messianic hope. Sorry, the fifth aspect has to do with the rise of prophetic literature and Messianic hope. Let's quickly have a quick recap of what I discussed. I talked about the division of the kingdom, which resulted to the exile of the Israelites. So the division of the kingdom was majorly caused by Solomon and Rehoboam's folly. Because because Solomon imposed a heavy taxation and also forced labor on the people, it resulted to them to the burden being added by Rehoboam, his son, and which led to the rebellion by the northern tribe, making Jeroboam their king, in fulfillment of the prophecy that Prophet Ahijah said concerning the nation of Israel. And this prophecy was given to the prophets by God, whereby Ahijah divided his coat into 12 pieces, giving Jeroboam 10 pieces, symbolizing 10 tribes, and keeping the remaining 2 pieces, symbolizing 2 tribes, that was supposed to be given to Solomon's son called Rehoboam. And also, we also discussed on the exile period. That's the Babylonian exile, which is 586 BC. But I'd not talk more on the Assyrian exile because that one was not significant. The one that is significant is the Babylonian exile. But if you were asked the year of the Assyrian exile, that's 722 BCE under Shalmaneser or Tiglath-Pileser. So I think I've come to the end of today's class. So what's the summary and key takeaway? The summary and key takeaway was that the division of the kingdom resulted from leadership failures and tribal tension, and also that Rehoboam and Jeroboam shaped early directions of Judah and Israel, and thirdly that exiles were both a punishment and a turning point of Israel's fate. So if you have any question, or you can look at your screen there are questions there I would like you to look at, so that when next week Tuesday precisely, we can discuss on that before moving to our main topic. Now the questions here are: what led to the division of the kingdom? How did Jeroboam's action affect Israel's worship? What were the major consequences of the exile? So please kindly look at this question before our next class on Tuesday. that we can just quickly have a recap on it. Thank you all.